Alright, another anti-contive odd response video, label number 5, and it's play and the players. So he's going to be arguing that he doesn't have obligations. My obligations to myself and the universe are symmetrical, which doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't have anything to do with the argument I was making. They're symmetrical if you're exchanging fairly, but if you're exchanging in the sense that you have a choice. You do a certain action, and if you do the action, you end up with a broken leg. And if you do the B choice, that's the A choice. The B choice is 500 people in the future get a broken leg. The rational obligation is to just recognize the grotesque, obvious math and concede to it. There's no, you're not going to be put in jail if you don't do it. There's not going to be any punishment. No one's going to spank you. The argument being made is the only intelligent choice, the only reasonable choice, is to accept the math and do what you're obligated by the math to do. So, the idea is that the future is bigger than the present, and that the entire human organism is bigger than you. And so, like the cells of my liver, they are required by nature to perform in the interest of the body. You don't wish to perform in the interest of the body because you're saying you are what's important and the body is not important. Simply, plainly. So I could analogize it to, let's say, instead of you having a self-interest in this game, the obligation I gave you was you were going to be responsible for a colony of rats. And let's say the rats are in chaos and they're living highly inefficiently because of a petty squabble that's been going, Hatfields and McCoys, and they've been having this petty squabble for centuries or whatever. So there's just chaos built into their function, okay? And so that it's at some level, whatever, 50% you could say, of blood being spilled. And it's so, but the point is, you have control. I give you control over one rat. All right, you can control the behavior of one rat, and we give you theoretical documentation explaining that if you take one rat and have him perform a few certain rituals with the other rats, that it will diminish the chaos in the colony by 25%. But it will risk that one rat's life. Or you can choose to control your one rat, have him steal all the cheese he can, hide in the corner, get really fat, and be really comfortable. So you can make one rat comfortable, or you can save centuries of chaos in the colony. The harm and suffering that would be created if this rat isn't controlled to do the right thing. And you're saying that you would have some rational reason to conclude that the right thing for you to do is to have the fat, happy rat in the corner and fuck the colony. That's what you would rationally, you think there's a way to defend that rationally. That somebody could defend that behavior rationally. They could provide me with an explanation explaining why that would be the right thing to do. No, they couldn't. It'd be impossible. Okay, so anyway, let's play this video. What you ought to get to, well, I'll ask you a direct question. What piece of Ayn Rand's philosophy do you disagree with? Is there anything she has ever said that you disagree with? Because why don't you just come out? Because you're basically just talking Nietzsche-Randianism. I mean, you're a fundamentalist Randite.
Gary, thank you for your response. Something that I fundamentally disagree with is the disequilibrium that you allege exists between myself and the universe.
Well, again, I didn't say there was a disequilibrium. What I'm saying is that your transactions are not with one other individual. And so any harms or any things your transaction are not just with that individual. They're with a whole giant collective. So That's the difference. The currency leaks into all of those people. The harm leaks into all of those people. So all I'm saying is the exchange rate is decidedly non-symmetrical.
I believe that that is a logical imbalance. I don't believe that there really is an imbalance between my obligation to myself and my obligation to the universe.
Well, again, the way you're rephrasing it, right? I would say the obligations have to balance, but there's no way you can make them balance rationally. What I'm saying is if there are certain events that take place, you eat the last ear of corn. Okay, now it doesn't mean too much if there's only one other person on the island besides you, but it means a hell of a lot if there's no corn for the rest of eternity.
And the reason I say this is as follows. If everything in the universe has an equal sense of obligation to itself and the universe, then...
So again, this equality thing is a real problem, right? Because we know that that's exactly what we're arguing about. I said it in my video. There is no fairness or justice or deserve built into the structure of our exchanges. And that rationally that's our obligation, is to install those fundamental basic functions of good gameplay. You can't have a good game without rules and umpires. The entire purpose of the Olympics is to create equality in the competition, not inequality, not to allow there to be some sort of unequal contest. And although there's an inherent discrimination in all sport, the point is in the sport itself there isn't. In the game itself there isn't. One team doesn't get to use, aluminum bats and the other team doesn't, or something like that. They play by the same rules, and it's equalized to provide that opportunity. No steroids or no this or no that, to make it a fair fight. This is what rational, sensible, intelligent animals do. They create a fair fight. They don't walk into the ring, kick the shit out of a midget, and say, I deserve my victory. And you don't take advantage of people born in slums and in poverty and say, you should have had better parents. That's bogus. Really bogus.
Ultimately, we have an equilibrium. We have each individual treating the universe and itself as more or less equals. If I have a bigger obligation to the universe,
well, like I said, it's just going to be a raw numbers thing. Your one life does not equal more like 500 future lives. It's just a silly notion for you to say that if there is an exchange to be made where one individual can suffer now, or 500 people can suffer the same suffering, in the future, and you have the choice to just reduce the harm to 1 instead of 500. I'm saying the rational obligation is there. You want to say there is nobody to force it, there's no umpires? I'm conceding there's no umpires. What I'm saying is intelligent people create umpires, they create fairness rules, and they say this is the obligation. Sorry, it's just the obligation. Again, you can say I'm too selfish to meet the obligation. Fine. I'm not saying we should force you or oblige you to be rational in most circumstances. Having kids is another separate subject because that's such an overt imposition. But, yeah, the obligation is there. Rational obligation. Just say you're not willing to be reasonable and fair because you're personally too selfish. But just admit that's exactly what you are. There's nothing in the rationality, there's nothing in the logic, there's nothing in the facts that indicate it's the right thing for you to do. It's only because you emotionally can't do it.
The whole, then the universe has, to me, then essentially what I'm saying is there are entities out there that actually have less of a sense of obligation to the universe than they have to themselves. That's the real disequilibrium.
So I guess this is some reference to welfare or something, or some other kind of thing, like that's not part of my equation. I'm not saying you have to finance the weaknesses other people have or subsidize their weaknesses, But I'm just saying we know the unfairnesses exist. We know the injustice exists. We know the lack of deserve exists. We know no one consents to play the game from, Indonesia. Okay, I would never agree to be an Indonesian, okay, and play the game from that position. So we know that people are put on the game board in highly disadvantageous positions. And for you to say you have a right to exploit that is bullshit.
That is inherent in your formula. I would say that if one person out there in the universe has more of a sense of obligation to the universe than to his or herself, that would create a disequilibrium.
Whatever. So again, now he's again trying to pretend that somehow somebody who would sacrifice for the rational purpose of calming the rats, who would choose to have the rat do the right thing and calm the whole herd of rats and spare the rats hundreds of years of suffering, is somehow creating disequilibrium, that somehow he's created a problem. He hasn't created any problem whatsoever. He has merely mitigated against something that should have never existed in the first place, which was the chaos. So again, you can't, this argument would be fine if there was some fair starting game that we were playing, some real fair game that was being played, but it's not a fair game. And certainly the future has no voice now. They are left silent. They don't get to vote on what you're going to do. They don't get to say right to your face, fuck you, cunt, don't be pissing in my drinking water. So you're not playing a fair fight or a fair game. And you're saying you have a right to be unfair. And I'm saying I don't think you have any such right.
For somebody else in the universe. You're creating an asymmetry there that doesn't actually exist. Don't forget.
Well, again, I'm not going to argue this over and over again. You think that your desire is all there is, and what I'm saying is we know that that's not all there is. There's desire, and it's paid for by somebody else's unsatisfied desires, or their overt suffering, or their overt exploitation. That's the world we live in. Now, you can fix that by sacrificing some portion of yourself and your self-interest, but you're certainly not going to fix it within your self-interest. That's not how the deficit gets paid or some other problem gets solved. It's not going to get solved if no one's willing to sacrifice any segment or any portion of their self-interest. This selfishness thing works is bullshit. It only works for cockroaches. It works for evolution to create monsters. It doesn't work for intelligent creatures trying to create civilization. You've given up on civilization. You think your kind, your Tyrannosaurus kind, will inherit the earth or something. You'll inherit a vile, disgusting, putrid dystopia.
There's more than just me in this universe. Thanks for your response.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, this whole attitude is just so disgusting in the face of the grotesque exploitation in which deserve has nothing to do with it, and you don't wish to implement deserve having something to do with it. Again, you might as well just get into the boxing ring with a midget and then sit there and jump around and talk about how great your genetics is. Yeah, fuck you. It's bullshit. I mean, it's just bullshit. And again, you can't, there's no way to rationally undo the fact that the future is bigger than the present. And if you're going to make a small compromise in the welfare of the present for a large bounty created in the future, rationality and logic says you are obligated to do it, or you're leaving a huge hunk of productive potential unrealized. And that is a sin against reason. Yeah, alright, that's enough. Keep it short. Yeah, relatively speaking. Yeah. So just admit you're a Randian. Just admit it.